Today, I'm really excited to have our guest, Sarah Kimmel, on the show today. She is a family tech expert. She's worked in IT for over 20 years, and now she helps families understand technology better. And I am so thrilled to have you here, Sarah. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So I'm your target audience. I really am. Probably age wise not, but there's a lot about technology that I don't understand. My kids didn't grow up with cell phones or laptops or anything like this. So talk to me about, you were in IT for 20 years. What did you do in IT during
So
those 20 years?
I mainly supported small businesses. So I worked for companies that are called managed services providers.
Mhm.
And so they're basically the IT department for small businesses because they can't hire their own IT department because that gets really expensive. So, I work for a company that has, hundreds of small business clients where, doing everything from setting up servers to helping them fix a virus on their computer or helping them print. So, it kind of spans the whole spectrum because
Yep.
it's a small business and they've got to do all of the things.
Yep. So you did that, and how did you get good at that, if I can ask? Do you go to school to become an IT expert?
Not necessarily. You can do computer science. My major was actually statistics.
Oh,
I'm
okay. Mhm,
I'm a math geek, I guess.
mhm,
But I've always kind of had an interest in technology. My dad is actually in IT as well. And
mhm,
so I've actually grown up with a computer my whole life, which is
mhm,
rare for somebody who's 44. My first cell phone was when I was in college.
mhm.
And it was like, just a basic flip phone with
Yep,
there was no screen or anything. You just can like call people on it. You can't
yep,
even really text. So,
yeah. My husband has one.
yeah.
He won't use an iPhone because once he gets looking at something, he can't stop. He said, "I'm just not going to do that." He'll go from ski site to ski site to ski.
Right.
But anyway, um, okay. So you did that, and then how did you get into being a family tech expert? And tell us what you do.
Yeah, so obviously I knew a lot about technology. And so all of my friends would come to me and say, hey, I have a virus on my computer. How do I fix it? Or, what should I get for my kid? Or all these questions would always be coming at me. And so I find I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm starting a blog and I'm just going to put it all there. I will give you the link. I'm tired of
Mhm,
answering the same questions over and over again.
mhm.
And so I started my blog actually in 2009. So it's been a bit. And then I've kind of adjusted and gone with the flow as social media and the internet has changed. So mostly I don't write on my blog as much anymore,
Mhm.
but I do YouTube videos, I do Instagram, I do podcasts. So I just kind of change with the times and try and meet people where they're already consuming content so that
Mhm.
it's easy for them to get the information that they need to help understand the technology in the platform that they want to use it on.
So let's jump into that. It, it's it can feel a little overwhelming to people like me. So
Yeah.
what your job is to help families understand technology, learn to be smart about it, to help their children. What specifically you do as a family tech expert?
It really is just education. And
Mhm,
so whether it's my podcast or my YouTube channel or Instagram, so my Instagram, I'll, make posts about different topics that, here's a scam that's going around, make sure you avoid this scam, or here's, some information that you need to keep private, or here's the apps that your kids are using and what's maybe problematic about each app.
okay.
So really bite-sized information that I think is easy. I've always kind of had a knack for being able to explain things that are technical in like non-technical ways.
Mhm.
And so I think that really helps people kind of put it together and feel like confident that they can understand what it's actually doing without really understanding the technology itself.
Right. Because I think that it feels like the Wild West for your average, 44-year-old parent who has a child with a cell phone. Um, the parents I see are afraid. I mean, their
Yes.
kids have cell phones and they think, how do I know what they're watching? How do I know who they're talking to? Um, what should I do? What's going on TikTok? So if you were me talking to a 40-year-old parent or 45-year-old parent who's scared because their kid's on an iPhone, where would you start them and how would you direct them as far as what kids, A, how to know what their kids are watching, and B, how to keep their kids safe on social media?
Yeah. So I really want to take the fear out of technology for people. And that's kind of my whole platform is, there's a lot of kind of parenting influencers that will scare you and,
Hmm.
make you terrified of all of the bad that can come from technology. I come from a very tech positive place because I love technology
Hmm.
and I love to use technology to help make my life easier. And so I really want to take that fear out of people. So, when somebody comes to you and they're scared, they're 44, they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. I usually just try and educate and say, hey, this is what can happen. This is how you prevent that. And this is what you can do to make sure that they're safe. And once they've got that knowledge, the fear just kind of goes away on its own because
Hmm.
they have that confidence that, like, okay, you know what? I can manage this. Even if I don't understand the technology, I know what it can do. I know how to protect it and I know what to do.
So do you have specific apps or programs that you advise parents to use for their kids? And if so, how do the apps work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually recommend multiple layers of parental controls. And that's because one layer is not really enough to access the different parts of the app or the technology to really protect it all the way. And let me kind of explain what I mean by that. So the first layer would be like an in-app control. And so a lot of people don't understand that like TikTok has built-in parental controls that you can set. And these are going to help filter the algorithm that the kid is looking at. It's going to protect them from direct messages from strangers and things like that. And that's something that like a basic parental control app on the phone can't do because it doesn't have access to TikTok. So
Hmm.
an in-app parental control is important to set no matter what app your children is using. So if they're in Roblox, there's in-app parental controls for Roblox. There's some parental controls you can set inside of Instagram. So every app kind of has their own little built-in system that you can set. And so that would be your first like layer of support. And then the next layer would be something that's on the device itself. And so Apple has their own built-in parental controls called screen time.
Hmm.
And you can set up the screen time restriction so that it shuts down at a certain time every day. It only gives certain apps, a certain amount of time, or you can shut down access to apps. They have to ask for approval to install an app so you know what apps are being installed.
Hmm.
So the built-in controls for Apple is called Screen Time. There's built-in controls for Android that is called Google Family Link. And
Hmm.
it's the same kind of thing where you can just set time limits and you can set restrictions on content and apps and things like that. So that's kind of your next layer of support. Then I also recommend something that will like monitor the content.
Hmm.
And so Bark parental
Hmm.
controls is one of my favorite. And basically, it's going to just notify you of anything that's concerning. So it's going to scan through text messages, through direct messages. If the child has an Android device, direct messages on Instagram and Snapchat and things like that. So it's going to scan all of that, and then it'll notify the parent if there's something concerning. So if there's talk of alcohol or
Hmm.
something, sexual content or anything like that, it's going to notify the parent. But what I like about it is it's not going to give you the full details. It's just going to give you the snippet that it found
Hmm.
concerning.
Hmm.
So that gives the kid a little bit of privacy. You're like, I don't care what you're talking about with your friend all day.
Hmm.
So, but if something's concerning, then I want to know about it. And
Hmm.
so that's when Bark will come in and then you can have a conversation with your kid. So one of my favorite examples to set, because my next layer would be like having conversations for sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and so, I got an alert for my son that he was looking up sexual content. I look at it and he was looking up bouncy balls. And so So I, sat
Oh,
him down. I'm like, Michael, you are in so much trouble. And he's like,
oh,
what? I'm like, you were looking up sexual content. And then I
oh,
showed him the alert and he starts laughing. He's like, oh my gosh.
yeah.
So, but having that conversation where they understand that you are monitoring what their activity is,
Hmm.
but that you're not going to overreact. You're not
Hmm.
going to jump to conclusions. You're going to ask for context
Hmm.
with whatever that you see. And so I think that's a really important part of like all of this is just to have those conversations and make sure you're on the same page.
Pornography is a real big issue for boys, and parents have a hard time accepting that when I say it. And I say, here's the thing: if you have a child, just like you were talking about, if you have a child who's looking up trucks and fishing and bow and arrows or whatever, and they get tagged as a boy or a young man, pornography will find them. So it's not like they're this kid, with malintent going out looking for pornography. And and even seeing a few things in pornography. I'll never forget, my son was 14 and he was doing his homework in my study and he screamed. And I said, "What is it?" He goes, "Mom, you can't believe what just came across my screen." And honestly, at 14, even it was traumatizing. So, is there anything that you can have on your phone or device that will prevent things like that coming through? I know Bark will alert you if they've come through, but is there anything that will prevent pornography coming through to boys?
Yeah. So I will say part of that is SEO hacking. Like this isn't the solution, but why this happens is SEO hacking. The people who are creating this content are basically making sure that it's being found by people searching for innocent things. And
Mm.
so they are really targeting people. And so it's not something they're necessarily looking for. It's
Mhm.
going to find them, exactly like you
Yeah.
said. And so I really like a filter on the Wi-Fi itself. So there's actually a free one that you can sign up for called OpenDNS.
Hmm.
If you just go to opendns.com, sign up for a free account, it works with whatever internet, whatever router that you already have. And that'll filter out a lot of the content, especially for like the really bad stuff.
Hmm.
Obviously, nothing's going to be perfect. There's
Right.
going to still be stuff that comes through. And that's why the conversations are going to be so important
Hmm.
when they do come across it, you have a plan in place beforehand because they are going to come across it,
Hmm.
even when you have these Wi-Fi filters in place. But the filter is definitely going to help kind of weed out the most egregious
Hmm.
parts of it,
Hmm.
but you do still need to be prepared for when it does come through.
That's awesome. Talk to me about girls who are on Instagram, 13, 14, 15-year-old girls who will believe anything anybody says, who are being groomed by older men who are coming out and, starting conversations. How do you prevent that from happening other than telling your daughter, look, anybody that you don't know who starts talking to you about, how hard life is and how he understands it? Is there anything that can prevent people from stalking or grooming girls?
Yeah, the first thing I would do is just make sure the strangers don't have access to your child. So, like I said, through Instagram, you can set a parental control where they do not get direct messages from anybody that they are not following.
Hmm.
And so that's going to help some of that. And then preparation is going to be the other key. I like to, like I said, I'm not fear based. I don't want to scare my children. I don't want to scare parents. But when I do come across news articles of things where, a child has been groomed, they left their house, they've, gone off with somebody, something terrible happened, I will bring that news article to my children and be like, hey, did you see what happened here? And it's going to, again, not be from a scary place, but like, what could they have done to prevent this from happening? Or
Hmm.
what can you do to make sure that this doesn't happen to you? And kind of show them like the warning signs, don't respond to any strangers, don't interact, even if they seem super nice, or even if I talk about personal identifiable information. So kids will put in their bio their age, their school, and things like that. And that bio, even if their account is private and they can't see the images, that bio is still public. And
Mm-hmm.
so somebody will message them, "Oh, hey, I'm in your like science class at such and such high school," because they've seen that in the bio. And so I'm like, don't trust that anybody is who they say they are. Make sure that you reach out to the person in your science class and be like,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, did you reach out to me on Instagram?"
Mm-hmm.
And so making sure that anything that's publicly identifiable, where you're talking about your hobbies and things like that, and they're like, "Oh, I love volleyball too,"
Mm-hmm.
just making sure they understand that that's not always real, and that's something that they need to figure out.
So even if they even if they don't put public information on, how can people who they don't follow or they don't haven't accept as a friend, how do those people get through to kids? Who, in other words, how do strangers get through to kids who are on Instagram and Facebook if they're not allowed to, if they're not friended and they're not, and your child isn't following them? Is it
Uh,
hard for them to crack through?
yeah, that would be difficult to get through those controls. The way kind of things happen um, outside of that is, say they're in a game, like playing Roblox is a very popular game among kids. They're playing in the game, and somebody in the game asks for their social, like they ask to take the conversation outside of the game. So,
Mm,
they ask for their Instagram handle or anything like that. And then they friend them there. And then that's when they can start up a conversation. And so just making sure that, if you're in a public space, you never give out your personal Instagram ID, or whatever other IDs that you have, your email address,
mhm.
your city or anything like that. So just making sure that they understand that no matter where you are, don't take the conversation elsewhere.
Mhm.
And I think that's really
Or
important.
answer any questions that don't have to do with the game,
Exactly.
maybe. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Keep
Mhm.
it game level. Like don't talk about any personal information. Don't talk about, your dog or anything like that.
Do you think that those games they play in public places with people they don't know are safe? Even if you've told them all this stuff, or is there or do you recommend they stay into private spaces, or are they safe in public gaming spaces?
It would definitely depend on the age and what they have previously kind of shown that they are capable of.
Mhm.
If my 13-year-old might be different from your 13-year-old.
Mhm.
And so they might be able to play online with other people and not kind of get into that. But, your 13-year-old might be different and, is a lot more trusting and things like that. So it's definitely dependent on their age and their readiness. I don't think all online games are terrible, especially my kids play Splatoon and there's online components, but it's not a huge part of the actual gameplay.
Mhm.
So, when the chatting is part of the gameplay. So a really popular game that has kind of waned lately was called Among Us.
Mhm.
And it was kind of similar, but you had to chat with strangers in order to discover who the suspect was. And so that was part of the gameplay, but it didn't necessarily, like, you don't need to talk about your dog or your city or, who you are to
Mhm.
find out who the suspect is.
Mhm.
So, making sure they understand that, keeping the chat within the gameplay, like I said, and
Yeah.
just about the game
Mhm.
is going to be important.
Yeah. So really, you're talking about helping educate parents to educate their kids.
Yes.
And so it's not just about us knowing things, but us being able to explain things to kids, which sometimes can feel a little intimidating because often the kids know, more than we do. So you have said a lot here, and I'm so grateful that you have explained things so well. In the few minutes that we have left, if you would very carefully go through and reiterate everything you've said so that a parent out there listening who, like me, who says, I've got kids on this, I'm a little bit nervous. can you start them and just say those layers again, and then the conversations you would have with your kids at, say, 12 versus 16?
Sure. So the layers would be an in-app parental control, like inside of TikTok, inside of
Got it.
Roblox, like inside of the app that your child is wanting to use or is
Okay.
using. So whatever app that is, just, do a Google search, TikTok parental controls, and you'll find
Got it.
exactly what controls you can set. So whatever app your kid is into, there is likely some built-in parental controls that you can set. So I
Perfect.
would do an in-app control first, and then an on-device control, which would be the like Apple Screen Time, the Google Family Link, or like layer that also with Bark, which is also on the device itself.
Mhm.
So those are kind of the on-device controls. And then one thing I didn't quite touch on, but I did with the Open DNS, is on your Wi-Fi. So the next level would be on your network, having a control set there to filter out, bad content and things like that. So those are kind of the layers. And then my favorite layer is conversations.
Yeah.
So making sure you're having these conversations frequently with your kids. It's not going to be like a one and done conversation. It's something that you're going to constantly talk to them about. Talk to them about pornography. Talk to them about the dangers on the internet. But to know that you need to be aware of what the dangers are. So, just making sure you're up on the news, you're following accounts like mine, where I'm
Mhm.
just going to let you know in bits and pieces, okay, hey, this is what you need to watch out for right now. And then this is a conversation that you can have with your kid as well to say, hey, this is something that's going on. This is something that this kid fell for. Do you think you would fall for something like that? Why not? Having those conversations on a frequent basis so they're not awkward, and making sure that you're all on the same page with that.
Yep. I think that's critically important. And a lot of that requires time. And I would just encourage parents, this is something that you have to take time for, because your kids are on devices or screens all the time. And, that's just so critically important.
To that point, I always tell parents, if your child was diagnosed with a disease, you would get on the internet and you would research the heck out of that disease. You would find out everything you need to know to keep them safe, to keep them healthy. And people are not doing that with technology. You're handing over a device that can be just as damaging as a complete disease.
Yeah.
And they aren't researching everything that they can about that technology before they hand it over so they can keep them safe and keep them healthy. And
Mhm.
so to that point, exactly, this is so important. Just think of it like your child was diagnosed with a disease and go from there.
You're absolutely right. And again, how we started the show was, parents will come in and their child has an iPhone and they're scared and they don't know what to do. So they feel overwhelmed and do nothing.
Right.
And that's one of the worst things that you can do. But to take the time to educate yourself through listening to you, and then also from believing, I really can get this. I'd never had
Yes.
those layers explained to me, but now I get it. I can,
Right.
okay, well, I can check that. And is there I know that with Bark, parents have an app and the child has an app, and that a parent will be alerted if something came over the child's phone or whatever. Do any of these other safety devices, or is the technology that's built into any of these things, do parents have to go looking for it? Or how does a parent know if it's been breached, for instance?
Yeah, I would just keep an eye on it. So with Bark, you open it up, it'll say if it's connected or not, if it's reporting on the data. I also like to explain to parents that a lack of data is also telling. So if you are looking at screen time reports and suddenly that there's a huge drop in them looking at, a specific app, maybe it's time to look and see if they have a burner phone in the house, or something like that, because the lack of data is also telling. So just keeping an eye on those and making sure they're working. So especially with iPhone, whenever there's an update, a lot of times all of the parental controls get reset. And
Ah,
so if you're not aware of that and a couple weeks go by and then suddenly you're looking and there's no reporting, okay, well, there's something broken. So you need to make sure that you're checking in with your parental controls and verify that they are continuing to work.
Well, Sarah, I've seen situations where kids will have multiple accounts and they will say things on their public account, Instagram, that they know their parents might be following, but then they have a hidden account somewhere. How do you find out if your child has a hidden account, or can you?
Yeah, that's a tough one. There is one way, especially if they are not as sneaky as they think they are, because you can be signed into multiple Instagram accounts on one phone. And so if you tap on your profile picture and then you tap on your kind of profile name at the top, there's a little drop down and you can see all of the accounts that are currently logged in to that phone. And a lot of times, actually, kids will have a secondary account. It doesn't always mean they're trying to be sneaky. Sometimes they call it their Finsta account, and it's their fake Instagram account where they're just going to post, dumb pictures or memes or anything like that. It's something that they don't want on their curated, fancy feed. They just want somewhere to kind of throw garbage at. And so it doesn't always necessarily mean they're trying to be sneaky, but sometimes it does mean that they're being sneaky. So I would check on that. With TikTok, it actually prevents them from logging out of their account if you set up that parental control. So they can't switch back and forth. So it really just depends on the platform. And you would need to just make sure if you see, again, the lack of data is telling. So if you see that they've used Instagram for 2 hours today, but there's no activity on their main account, then maybe it's something to talk to them about or look into further.
Okay. Does that mean then that you need to physically take your child's device and look and see if it's being updated? So you have to go through and see what the settings are, or how does a parent find that out?
Yeah, most of the time, the parental controls, especially with Google Family Link and with Apple Screen Time, you actually can set them with your own device. And then it kind of passes through to your child's device. So for iPhone, you do have to have an iPhone in order to control the screen time settings. But for Android, you can have an iPhone or you could have an Android and just install Google Family Link, and you can control your child's Android device with either platform.
Wow. So they're very nice to us, I guess.
Yeah.
That's a real positive thing. You don't often hear positive things that devices will or technology a device will have that is actually pro-parent. So I think that's really nice. Well, Sarah, I am so grateful that you came. You have really untangled a very complex problem that a lot of parents feel and see as far as technology. But I think, my takeaway with you is you really can understand this and you can learn it and you can implement it. And I think if we do that well, it really does take the fear out of things. So how can people find out about you, your podcast? How can they connect with you?
Yeah, my podcast is Family Tech Talk. And then I'm Family Tech on all platforms. So whatever platform is your favorite, if you search for Family Tech, you'll find me.
Perfect. Sarah, it's been delightful. My guest has been Sarah Kimmel, and she is a family tech expert. And I strongly recommend that you find her, that you go check out her podcasts or blogs, and you will learn so much from her. So, Sarah, thanks for coming on.